He had a badge, he had a uniform, he had a car built to look exactly like a police cruiser. Cage in the back seat, lights on the dash, doors that lock the second they close. He was never a cop. At 1 in the morning, a 23-year-old woman got into that car believing she was finally safe. She wasn't. Her last text arrived minutes later. One word, goodbye. Then her phone went dark. It never turned back on. 9 hours later, she didn't show up for work. 24 hours later, her name was on every police radio in 3 counties. 48 hours later, this man was leading police on a high-speed chase across 2 states, after a kidnapping, a shooting, and a confession so cold it made national headlines. This is the case that rewrote campus security law in the state of Oregon. This is the case of the man who looked detectives in the eye and told them he had fought an urge to kill his entire life. This is the case of Kaylee Sawyer. Bend, Oregon, a postcard mountain town in the high desert, ringed by pine forest, home to about 10,000 college students, and a crime rate low enough that people still walk home alone at night without thinking twice. Kaylee Sawyer was 23 years old. She worked as a dental assistant at Aubrey Dental. She was also a student at Central Oregon Community College. She lived just outside campus with her boyfriend of 2 years, Cameron Reimhofer. On the night of Saturday, July 23, 2016, Kaylee got ready for a friend's bachelorette party in downtown Bend. She danced, she laughed. By every account, it was an ordinary night out. Just after midnight, she called Cameron for a ride home. In the car, they argued, the kind of small, forgettable fight most couples have, and moved past. Kaylee stayed in the car, upset. Cameron stepped away to give her space. When he came back outside a few minutes later, Kaylee was gone. He wasn't alarmed, not yet. She often walked to cool off. It was something she did. He expected her back any minute. At 1 a.m., Kaylee sent Cameron one last text. Her phone was dying, she said. Then, goodbye. She never turned it back on. 9:46 p.m. the night before. That's the last time Kaylee's phone had pinged a cell tower in Bend, according to investigators piecing together her final hours. After that, there is a gap in the timeline, a silence. And into that silence walked a man in a uniform, driving a vehicle built to look exactly like a police cruiser. His name was Edwin Lara, 31 years old, a campus security officer at Central Oregon Community College, working the night shift. His vehicle had a light bar. It had a partition, a steel cage, separating the front seat from the back. The doors in the rear were child-proofed, so they couldn't be opened from the inside. His uniform was styled to look like law enforcement. His badge caught the streetlight the same way a real one would. To Edwin Lara, none of that was real authority. It was theater. But to a young woman walking alone at 1 in the morning, it didn't need to be real. It only needed to look real. According to Lara's later confession, he approached Kaylee and offered her a ride home. She accepted. Why wouldn't she? The car looked official. The man looked official. She thought she was getting into safety. The doors locked behind her. Lara drove, not toward Kaylee's apartment, but along a winding access road deep into the community college's own campus, to a remote gravel lot ringed by juniper and sagebrush. Parking lot B12. No cameras, no witnesses, no one to hear anything at all. What happened in that parking lot over the next several minutes was one of the most brutal crimes Deschutes County had ever seen. Lara assaulted Kaylee. She fought back, hard. He tried to strangle her, and she kept fighting. So he picked up a rock from the gravel lot, a rock investigators would later say weighed close to 50 pounds, and he used it to end her life. Kaylee Sawyer died in that parking lot. She was 23 years old. Lara put her body in the trunk of his own vehicle, not the security car, but his personal Nissan Altima, and drove nearly 20 miles out of town along Highway 126 to a stretch of remote road near the Dry Creek area outside Redmond. He left her there, barely off the shoulder, half hidden by brush. Then Edwin Lara drove home. His wife, Isabel Ponce Lara, was asleep. a rookie officer just weeks into her career with the Bend Police Department. When she woke the next morning, he was in bed beside her, as if nothing had happened at all. They went to church together that Sunday. Isabel noticed her husband seemed quiet. She thought it was just the strain in their marriage. She had no idea she was sitting beside a murderer. Sunday, July 24th, 9 in the morning. Kaylee doesn't show up for her shift at the dental office. Completely out of character, she was never late, never absent. By early afternoon, Cameron can't reach her. Her phone is dead. Her mother, Julie Van Cleve, can't reach her either. And a mother always knows. Something was wrong. That afternoon, Cameron calls 911. Kaylee is officially reported missing. Detectives move fast. They clear Cameron. They clear the man Kaylee had danced with at the bar. Every early lead runs cold. But one person already knows exactly where Kaylee is, and it's tearing him apart. Monday morning, July 25th, Isabel notices her husband is unraveling. Pale, distracted, silent. She presses him, and Edwin Lara breaks. He tells her he hit a woman with his car. An accident, he says. He panicked. He got rid of the body. Isabel is a police officer. Her husband has just confessed to a crime. She has to make a choice that will define the rest of her life. At 11:30 that morning, Edwin Lara grabs his wife's handgun and walks out the door. He knows what's coming. By 11:52 a.m., Isabel is at the Redmond Police Department telling detectives that her husband just confessed to killing a woman, and detectives immediately know the name, Kaylee Sawyer. Lara is now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. He is already gone, he is armed, and nobody yet knows just how far he's willing to go to stay free. That evening, a search of Lara's home turns up Kaylee's green purse, her driver's license, her passport, a blood-stained rock, a lock of hair, her high heels, his own work boots stained with blood, and one more thing, a chilling piece of evidence that had been sitting in his house for years. A school project Lara had written on the serial killer, Angel Maturino Resendez, describing almost clinically how Resendez always killed with blunt force trauma, using whatever weapon happened to be nearby. Kaylee had been killed exactly that way. By nightfall, investigators find Lara's Nissan Altima. Dried blood soaks the trunk. Hair is caught on the rear bumper. The evidence is undeniable. Kaylee's body had been in that car. But while police process the scene, Edwin Lara is already 90 minutes down the road, driving towards Salem, Oregon. And what happens next turns a murder investigation into a two-day, two-state crime spree that no one saw coming. Monday evening, 8:45 p.m., outside a clothing store in Salem. 19-year-old Andrea Mays is walking to her car after work when a man approaches, gun raised, and tells her he's a police officer. He orders her into her own vehicle. Terrified, she obeys. She has no idea she has just been kidnapped by the most wanted man in Oregon. Inside the car, Edwin Lara pulls up a news article on his phone. A missing woman in Bend. He tells Andrea, "I did that. I killed her." For the next 12 hours, Andrea Mays is his hostage. He forces her south, toward California, confessing along the way, telling her about an urge to kill he says he's fought his whole life, and that this weekend, finally, he gave in to it. At a motel in Cottage Grove, Lara handcuffs her, forces her to swallow sleeping pills. Andrea believes in that room that she may be assaulted, may be killed. Then Lara's phone rings. He grows spooked, convinced police are closing in, and drags her back on the road. Twice he stops at rest areas, hunting for a different car, something the police wouldn't be looking for. Every mile, every minute, Andrea doesn't know if she'll survive the next one. Tuesday, July 26th, 5 in the morning, Yreka, California. Lara pulls into a motel parking lot, looking for a vehicle to steal. He finds an elderly man near a car and demands his keys. The man refuses. Lara shoots him in the abdomen. Andrea screams, but Lara grabs her by the hand and drags her on foot to a nearby gas station, where he finds his next targets. Two young brothers and their elderly grandmother sitting in their car. At gunpoint, Lara forces his way inside and orders them to drive. For the next several minutes, 3 more terrified strangers are along for the ride, listening as Edwin Lara casually confesses, again, to murder, to kidnapping, to the shooting in Yreka. One of the teenage boys quietly urges him to stop talking. Lara doesn't stop. He keeps talking about the urge to kill, like it's a disease he never asked for. Around 5:40 a.m., Lara releases the family unharmed on Interstate 5 and keeps driving south, now with Andrea still in the car, in a fleet of California Highway Patrol units and a police helicopter closing in from every direction. At 6:18 a.m., he finally sees them. He knows it's over. Lara calls 911 himself. He tells the dispatcher, Rebecca Duden, that he's driving 120 miles an hour, that he's wanted for a murder back in Oregon, but he insists, even now, that it was an accident. She keeps him on the line, keeps him calm, promises he won't be shot if he pulls over peacefully. At 7:01 a.m., Edwin Lara finally stops the car. Officers surround him, weapons drawn. It's over. For Andrea Mays, the terror doesn't end the moment the guns come down. Police, unsure at first whether she was an accomplice or a victim, take her into custody, fingerprint her, and photograph her, while she is still in shock from 12 hours held at gunpoint. It isn't until Oregon detectives arrive that they clear her name. She's released the next day and reunited with her family. Edwin Lara is taken into an interrogation room, and there, calmly, almost without emotion, he confesses to everything. The murder, the kidnapping, the carjackings, the shooting. He talks about Kaylee the way you describe a task, not a person. And then he says the sentence that would end up in headlines across the country. I think my whole life I've struggled in some way with the urge to kill. But what's helped me not develop that is when I married my wife. Later that day, police recovered Kaylee's body along Highway 126, exactly where Lara had left it 2 days earlier. The autopsy confirms blunt force trauma, along with evidence of strangulation and injuries sustained while she fought for her life. On July 27, 2016, Edwin Lara is formally charged with murder. Deschutes County District Attorney John Hummel announces he'll seek the death penalty, but the case hits a wall almost immediately. A judge later throws out Lara's initial confession, ruling that his rights hadn't been properly read to him. For a family desperate for accountability, it's a gut punch. Kaylee's grandfather, Jim Walden, doesn't hide his outrage. What about her rights? Still, the physical evidence never moves. Kaylee's blood in Lara's car, her belongings in his shed, the blood-stained rock. On January 22, 2018, a year and a half after Kaylee's death, Edwin Lara pleads guilty to aggravated murder and robbery, sparing himself the death penalty. Judge A. Michael Adler asks him directly, did he take Kaylee's purse by threat of deadly force, causing her death? Lara answers, yes. He is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, Kaylee's mother, Julie Van Cleve, speaks through her grief. Kaylee Ann Sawyer is my firstborn. The moment I held her, I understood what love at first sight meant. Her grandfather doesn't hold back either, calling Lara out for what he was, a predator who stole a young woman's future and never once acted like he understood what he'd taken. Judge Adler tells Lara plainly, he saw a vulnerable young woman as prey, and he acted like the predator he was. Lara shows almost no emotion. His only statement, a hope that the community and Kaylee's family could someday heal. In 2019, federal prosecutors add a second life sentence for the kidnapping of Andrea Mays. U.S. Attorney Billy Williams calls him exactly what he is, a ruthless killer who will rightfully spend the rest of his life behind bars. But Kaylee's family wasn't done. In 2017, they sued Central Oregon Community College, arguing the school had handed a violent man the tools to impersonate law enforcement, a car with a cage, a uniform that mirrored a badge, and no meaningful check on who was allowed to wear it. In 2020, the college settled with Kaylee's family for $2 million. Part of that settlement now funds a children's reading program her mother started in Kaylee's memory. But money was never really the point. The real fight was for a law. In 2019, the Oregon legislature passed Senate Bill 576, known across the state simply as Kaylee's Law. Signed by Governor Kate Brown, it bans campus security vehicles from carrying police-style lights or cages. It requires uniforms and vehicles to be unmistakably different from real law enforcement. It mandates in-car cameras, GPS tracking, and full national background checks for every officer hired. 2 years later, lawmakers extended those same protections beyond college campuses to private security companies statewide. Kaylee's father, Jamie Sawyer, fought alongside legislators to see it passed. Her mother still runs the reading program in her name. As Julie Van Cleve has said in the years since, she doesn't want people to remember her daughter as a murder victim. She wants people to remember Kaylee. Edwin Lara will die in prison. He will never walk free again. Kaylee Sawyer was 23, a dental assistant, a student, a daughter, a partner, a friend to everyone who knew her. Her life was taken by a man wearing the appearance of protection, driving a vehicle built to earn her trust in the dark. But her name didn't disappear with her. It's written into Oregon law. It's protecting students on campuses she'll never get to walk again. This has been the case of Kaylee Sawyer. If this case shook you the way it shook an entire town in Oregon, hit subscribe, because Sealed Verdict covers one case like this every single week. The crimes true crime forgets, told the way the victims deserve. Drop a comment and tell me, should uniformed impersonation carry the same charges as the crime it enables?